Hello, this is Coach Wilson, and this is Unit 10, Day 3. Today's journal, I'd like for you to talk about what are some of the issues that Jews faced prior to concentration camps in World War II. I'd also like for you to watch this little short 3-minute video on Hitler's Ultimate Stadium. It talks a little bit about the 1936 Olympics as well as Hitler's plans after the Olympics. It's kind of a neat little article. Let's take a few minutes and watch that. Today we're going to be talking about the fight in Europe. Talking about some of the things going on during the beginnings of the war. We're also going to be talking about what factors encourage the fighting between the Allied and Axis powers. Now, Hitler planned to take the Sudetenland as one of the first things that he wanted to do as a German. And the Sudetenland was a large German-speaking area of Czechoslovakia. And this was one of those areas that formed after the Treaty of Versailles in World War I. Czechoslovakia strongly resisted Germany's demands. They were not interested in being a part of Germany. Allied with France and the USSR, Czechoslovakia pushes back. And then in September 29th of 1939, we're going to see appeasement. Okay, and so they decide that they're going to give in to Germany, basically give them the Sudetenland, mainly so that they can avoid a war. Problem is, Germany's not going to be appeased for very long. Now, there were Sudeten Germans who were on the border who begged for Germany to take over, and obviously were very excited when Germany did come in. However, this doesn't represent all of Czechoslovakia. Now, ethnic Czechs who lived in the Sudetenland were most certainly not taking part in these celebrations. Still, it's hard to ignore that what Hitler was doing was very popular with a lot of people. People liked the structure that Hitler brought and this elite belief, or this idea of an elite people that he brought with him. Now, in October of 1938, Hitler is going to demand the return of Danzig, which is the land that was also taken from Germany after World War I, which becomes Poland. And Britain and France at this point are pretty much convinced that appeasement has failed, which it has, because Hitler essentially is continuing to demand more and more land. March 31st of 1939, Britain and France come to Poland's aid, or said they would if Germany invaded. In May of 1939, Hitler ordered the German army to prepare to invade Poland. And on August 23rd of 1939, Germany and the USSR signed a non-aggression pact, basically Germany preparing a war. All right, Germany doesn't want to have to deal with France, Britain, and Russia. If they can just deal with one or the other, it makes it easier on them. So they signed this non-aggression pact, in which they agreed not to attack each other, and they would split Poland between them once the war was over. So Hitler is doing everything he can to try to prepare for invasion. Now, on the other side of things, we have Roosevelt. All right, and remember, FDR is still our president. He is very much in charge of our country, and he's going to pass the Neutrality Act of 1937. Now, this is an addition to 1935's Neutrality Act because it required that warring countries would have to buy war goods on a cash carry basis. So now we can sell goods to warring countries as long as they basically pay for it there in cash and carry the weapons on their own ships. We don't want to be involved past that. Roosevelt's also going to aid China in its struggle with Japan. Remember, Japan's invaded in Manchuria. We were kind of upset about that, about the way that the military is running the government, and we're going to aid the Chinese. And Roosevelt's warning was that the nation should not stand by and let an epidemic of lawlessness infect the world. Specifically talking about the United Kingdom and France declaring war on Germany. Roosevelt wasn't necessarily, keen on getting involved, but I think he realized that something had to be done about Germany. He saw the reality of what was going on. Now, you're going to have the Axis powers form. Hitler and Mussolini of Italy sign an agreement pledging to cooperate on several international issues. The following month, Japan joined with Germany and Italy, and we have the three major players of the Axis powers. Now, on September 1st of 1939, the war begins. Germany invades Poland. They've, made their peace with Russia. They've kind of gotten their claws into parts of Czechoslovakia. Now they're going to start pushing further into the east. On September 3rd, Great Britain and France declared war on Germany. And on September 27th, Warsaw, the Polish capital, fell. By October 5th, the Polish army had been defeated. So within a month, Germany had completely overrun Poland and completely now controls another portion of Europe. Now, the way that Hitler was able to be so effective was using a tactic called the Blitzkrieg. And it was the German word for lightning war. And essentially, the idea of the Blitzkrieg was speed and surprise. Now, many people couldn't figure out how the German army moved so fast and how they were so able to get from place to place and be so aggressive. One of the ways they did this was through amphetamines. They made them take basically drugs to make them march faster and to stay awake and not sleep. And essentially, the German soldiers did it because they were so dedicated to their country, they did whatever they asked them to do. Now, the policy adopted by France and England to appease Hitler had not worked, and essentially they gave Hitler what he wanted by avoiding conflict. So in appeasing Hitler and allowing him to take the Sudetenland and unifying Austria, now they have allowed Hitler to amass even more resources, and they've allowed him to grow to the point that now he is a superpower, and Germany is a superpower. Now, in June 1940 through October of 1940, we get the Battle of Britain. In June of 1940, Britain was bombed, and by mid-August, Hitler declared all-out war in the air. By late August, Germans accidentally actually bombed London itself, and the following night, the British bombed Berlin. So, they say accidentally, but it's kind of hard to accidentally bomb an entire city. Hitler ordered the bombing of London, and basically after Berlin was bombed, he said, hey, we're going back, and now we're going to bomb it for real. The bad thing for Hitler was that Britain had developed radar technology by this time, and because of that, it's going to allow them to actually be very successful in the Battle of Britain over the course of these couple of months. And they're going to be so successful that they'll be able to push back the Luftwaffe and win the Battle of Britain. Now, this is a picture of one of the air raids on London. I know it's not a great picture, and you can watch some of the videos, but these are just various pictures of what London looked like after the bombing. Every night, Londoners took shelter in the subways or the tubes. At first, it was thought of as a low-class thing to do, but soon the government encouraged people to do it. At night in the tubes, the spirit of shared misery and camaraderie was infectious. Every Londoner had to rub shoulders with every other Londoner. They were all in it together. And they found out they really liked each other. And so what happens here is that essentially in trying to flee for their lives and be fearful of, being bombed, they learned to kind of be in it together and join together, and it promoted unity in the country. Now, in the above picture, you can see an elderly couple make the best of it in the tube station. People of every walk of life rubbed shoulders with each other. On the left, by dawn, all this was cleared out of the way so the subway trains could get Londoners to work. So essentially, they figured out ways to work together, but also to protect the citizens. By dawn, some of the subway dwellers' homes were still standing and others were destroyed, but everyone went to work and basically tried to deal with, this is life, this is how things are right now, we can't do anything about it. And people felt so compelled to do their duty that absenteeism actually declined. People actually showed up more to work, of course, unless they didn't make it. But people actually did whatever it took to get to work and do the things that they had to do. Now, many times parents sent their children out of harm's way out into the countryside, away from London. And it was always said that until you're a parent, you will not know how hard this must have been for London parents. But with a London a fiery inferno night after night, at least they knew their children would be safe and away from the war. Here you can see parents waving goodbye to their children who are heading to safe homes in the country abroad. Okay, and this is somewhere out in the British countryside. Of patrons do their part to provide a hearty meal and safe and loving home to strangers' children. So a lot of times you may have, 8, 10, 12, 15 children who aren't even yours, along with the children that maybe come from your family. Now, this is a picture of the Holborn Circus in London burning in the height of the Blitzkrieg. London was bombed on, or not Blitzkrieg I should say, but just the Blitz. London was bombed on 76 consecutive nights as part of the Battle of Britain campaign by the German Air Force in 1940. And this is just so you get an idea of what it looked like during the war and understand that in our country, in the United States, we've never had the amount of destruction that London and England itself went through during this time. Here's a quick picture of Berlin. We don't have as many pictures, obviously, of Berlin as we do London, but that's just to kind of give you an overview. All right, here's your 3 vocabulary words. Make sure you get all 3 of those down, and please let me know if you have any issues. If not, I'll talk to you soon.